Well, in this week's Sydney Pride, we're going to look at the subject of sex. It's very difficult to talk about that in just 2 minutes. But let me summarize it this way. We're not talking about biological sex. We'll come to that when we're discussing about that and gender. But we're talking about what is sometimes known as making love. We're talking about the sexual act. And what are there? Should there be any limits? We live in a highly sexualized society which has a specific philosophy of sex. And I want to suggest to you that the Christian philosophy, rather than being repressive, is the best that there is. So let's just say what it's not. First of all, there are people who regard sex as social. That's the basic view within our culture. That it's something that you do. It's like an appetite. It's like food. You've got a hunger for a particular type of food, you go out and get it. You have a sexual appetite. Sometimes people will have different sexual appetites, and all of that's fine. You can do whatever you want. That's all it is. I think that's a very weak perspective, to be honest, and harmful for lots of reasons. Just think of STDs, think of broken relationships, think of the confusion that comes from doing something that actually as human beings we're not meant to do. The second view of sex is to consider it as sordid. So you consider it as social, or you consider it sordid, or in Christian terms you might say sinful. It's the kind of, that it's dirty almost. And you see that in different ways. You see that in terms of within religious culture sometimes, and again within the church, that's sometimes there. Or you see it the way that people talk about sex in secular culture, which can be quite demeaning and degrading, to be honest. Isn't it interesting how many of the most common swear words are sexual, referring to bodily parts that are used in sex or sexual actions? Why do we do that? We come to treat it as sordid. So the Christian view is not a social view of sex, and it's not a sordid view, but it's a sacred view. What does that mean? It means that rather than regard sex as dirty, we regard it as special. That it is an act between a man and a woman. Yes, it's there for procreation, but it's also there to provide intimacy and union. And the Bible has some very clear and explicit teaching. There's a lot I could say, but let me go, for example, to 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 5. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but yields it to her husband. All kinds of alarm bells going off there. But let me go on. In the same way, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but yields it to his wife. Do not deprive each other, except perhaps by mutual consent and for a time, so that you may devote yourselves to prayer. There's that mutual consent. There's that giving yourself to one another. Sex in the Christian philosophy is not about taking and getting for my pleasure. It is about giving. I think there's so much positive. I don't have time, obviously, to go into all the different things. But for me, the biblical view, how sex is often described as knowing one another, that sense of intimacy, it is very, very special. And that's what I think we should teach children. That's what I think we should teach ourselves. That's what I think we should come to realize. We should not treat it as sordid. We should not treat it as recreational or just an appetite. We should treat it as sacred and special. So, you want to find out more? Please do just go onto the Ask website, ask whatever questions you want, or drop me an email. God bless you, and bye.